Let's jump right in. My wiring looked like this. I used DuPont connectors, some solid core wire to connect all the grounds, some black wire to connect all the grounds, and I soldered them all to the switch using zip ties to clean it all up. I left a few links to some soldering tutorials in the description below. I'm using the Pro Micro to show you it's possible. You can use every single pin on the Pro Micro and it'll fit the switch panel. I would recommend using an Arduino Mega or a Pro Mega just because you can do so much more with them. There are way more pins for about the same price. Let's get on to configuring it. After we plug in our Arduino, let's open up MobiFlight to a blank configuration. If you haven't downloaded MobiFlight, you need MobiFlight and FSUIPC. You can download them both by Googling them, and if you need a tutorial, there's one in the description below. You'll get this little screen that says, there are Arduinos connected to your PC, and you'll upload firmware to the Arduino. This will flash it with the MobiFlight configuration, and you can get crack-a-lackin'. Let's go ahead and name the Arduino Switch Panel. There we go. And we can add a few devices. We're going to add a ton of buttons. Everything on this switch panel is a button. There are 5 buttons over here, 7 buttons over here, 2 buttons here, and 2 buttons here. These all go into the Arduino, making a total of every pin but one. So I think it's 16 out of the available 17. So let's add a device and go to button. We'll start with the switch panels, and I'll just basically go around seeing which ones go to which. My first time around, I basically assigned pins randomly. I would assign a pin to what I thought the pin was, and if I was wrong, I would just change it later. It might be more helpful, however, to configure as you go. So plug one wire in, know that that is that function, and then make a little switch configuration for it, and then go on to the next one, do it, and so on. Just when you flash the Arduino, and that'll make sure you don't mislabel any of the pins, like I did. Alrighty, I just pressed this little upload button, finished it up, and here we go. Awesome, we can click OK and start configuring. I do want to do a little bit of a control test first. You'll notice my debugging window is on. I turned this on by going to Extras, Settings, General, and Logging to a level of debug. That just lets you know whenever something happens. So without even making a configuration, we know that the fuel pump, press release, beacon, press release. Is that how you spell beacon? Shoot, it's not. Now let's try landing light, press release, correct, taxi, nav, strobe. So pitot heat is in op. We'll have to tag it. Tag, you're it. If we go up to MobiFlight modules, we can see the pins. Pitot heat wasn't assigned to anything. It was assigned to the 0 pin, which I didn't have anything in. That's why it didn't work. So an easy fix there. Alrighty, we uploaded the configuration. And now, let's see if we did it. So off is pressed. The next is right, left, both, start. That's all we needed. So the switch is accurate. Let's see the master, alternator, and battery. Awesome. These should all be correct. Avionics Master 1 and Avionics Master 2. Woohoo! And now, let's get configuring. Make sure to save your work over here so you don't lose it. To be honest, the pinouts really don't matter. As long as you match the pins to the switches and their functions, you should be perfectly good to go. So don't stress about this too much if you don't have to. Under inputs, let's make our configuration rows. So we're going to make one configuration for each item. I like to activate them all at the start just so they're all ready to go. And then let's start with off. So click this little 3 edits hamburger, go to input, and then under module, you only have one choice. I hope you can get it right. If it doesn't show, make sure your module is loaded up correctly, plugged in, and try restarting MobiFlight. Before we get too deep into FSUIPC offsets and masking values, I want to show you an easier way. It almost always works, but in a few instances, FSUIPC offsets work better. So these are called both FSUIPC events and Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 events. We'll just use the fuel pump switch that's over here. It can be on whatever pin as long as it's connected to a switch. Let's make a new input for fuel pump, and this will be an event. Activate it, press edit, and, or here, select your module, your fuel pump. This is how you'd configure it. And now you go to FSUIPC event IDs. So these are the events, and you have this big list over here. I bet it starts with an F for fuel. So you basically guess and check. F for fuel selector, fuel pump. So it does have it. Use parameter. Now let's do the same thing. FSUIPC event ID, fuel pump. You can even use the arrow keys as a drop down. Click use, and let's say 1 for the parameter on press and 0 on release. Let's open up FSX and see how it works. Click run and go from there. So this is an event ID. Just looking over here, I want to explain this. We looked at the event ID and then we called it up using this event ID number over here that was from the preset list over here. We just clicked use, and that's basically how I do event IDs. You then say a parameter for what it will do. So when you press it, it'll turn to a 1 or an on state, and when you release it, it'll turn to a 0 or an off state. And this is pretty typical. So let's make one more type of event ID. I deactivated the fuel pump just so we wouldn't have to deal with it. Event ID, let's have this one, fuel selector. We're going to have a switch between both and right. Let's say we only wanted to select one of the two positions. In real life, you'd have a 3-position switch, and you can refer to my rotary switch video on how to do that. But you have a module, switch panel, device, still use a fuel pump, we just want, just for demonstration, event ID, and then for this, we'll say fuel selector 2, right, fuel selector 1 to right, it should be the first one. Fuel selector to the right, fantastic. And then on release, fuel selector to the left. Or to all, I guess. There we go. Click. Alright, so fuel selector all and fuel selector right. So it'll switch between both tanks and the right tank. That's the idea. So on the right position when the fuel pump is pressed, and the both position when the fuel pump is released. So we basically have a toggle switch between the right and the both positions. This is super helpful because that means you can just scroll through this long list to find which event IDs help you. So you could find something like lights, strobes on off, and then use one of these presses for each type. There's also strobe set, and that's the version you can use the parameters for. If we go over here, you could have strobe set to 1, and on release, strobe set to 0. So 1 and 0. This is the parameter way. There's also the event ID way, I guess, if we want to separate those two paths. So let's see if it worked out. Yes, when I click this button, the strobe light functions. So this is the event ID way. Let's go to the FS 2020 WASM module. So the WASM module stands for Web Assigned Sim Module. It's the FS 2020 way of doing things, but it is pretty self-explanatory. If you go to Edit, Module, Switch Panel, and then Device, Fuel Pump, just like we've done in the first few for demonstration purposes, we can select a Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 event. So this basically gives you a ton of groups over here. Usually you'll use your airplane or Microsoft generic groups over here. And then you'll use events. So it's basically the EventID list, but a lot longer. One of the tools you can use to navigate all of this is called HubHop. Go to hubhop.mobiflight.com, a link in the description, and you can search all of these. It's a really cool thing they've been doing. Go to the view contributions, and you can search everything over here. So, let's see, reset filters. You can search over in this box over here. What do we want? Low flying airplane noises. When do we want them? Yeah. Oh, I got distracted. So let's say we want something that'll show up on the Cessna 172. Let's say we want the alternator, or the battery, like the alternator. We can toggle master alternator. So basically whenever the switch changes positions, we would turn it off or on. Or we could use the Cessna 172 alternator, on or off. So this one is specific to the Cessna 172, which makes it appealing if you're only going to use one airplane. So the Cessna 172 alternator, on, that's the input, and we can see all this information over here. So it's by Asobo, so we can filter that down. It's in the Asobo group. It is in the Cessna 172 group over here, and it is in electrical. So Asobo Cessna 172 electrical, and you can see we have all of these options. Alternator on and off. On press, we'll say it's on. Same thing over here. Events, group, Asobo Cessna 172 electrical, and alternator off. So if you press it, it's on. If you release it, it's off. Good, good. Now let's see how it works with Flight Sim 2020. Alright, so over here, we did it. The Flight Sim 2020 WASM module coordinates to the alternator switch. So we can see it works correctly. Let's try something else and see how that goes. Let's do the same exact thing we did last time. Use switch panel with fuel pump, just for an example, and FS 2020 events, group, and we can search it up again. So now I found these two events right here. C172, both fuel tanks, and left fuel tank, and right fuel tank. So let's use right fuel tank as one of them. We'll say on press. So it's the Asobo Cessna 172, electrical, no, fuel, fuel, and both fuel tanks from the drop down. On release, do the same thing, events, Asobo Cessna 172 fuel, right tank, right fuel tank. Alrighty, let's see if this works. Ready? And it works. So that is how you use the event IDs and the FS 2020 events. Now I'm going to go through and configure them all with FSUIPC offsets, and that works well for me because I know they work for X-Plane, FS 2020, and FSX, and prepared. So I like using offsets because they're more flexible. Let's start with off. So click this little 3 edits hamburger, go to input, and then under module, you only have one choice. Under device, you want your device. This is the off switch. And let's go over to FSUIPC offset. For these FSUIPC offsets, they go from MobiFlight to a software to the flight simulator. So it's basically a middleman. So if you download the proper version of FSUIPC or XPYPC for X-Plane, then you can basically talk from MobiFlight to the simulator easily. So it's basically a middleman. So you can go into the giant FSUIPC offset status PDF. I have the standard paths to all of the FSUIPCs over here. So that's kind of nice. Feel free to open up the PDF and go have a look. So use Control F and then search for Magneto. Awesome. Boom. First result. We're going to use offset 08902. This is basically the number that the software FSUIPC uses to communicate with the simulator. put that in the offset list right here. Just paste it. You can even paste it like that and it'll autofill. It's an interval because it's going to be a 1 through 5. 1 through 5, those are all numbers or intervals. Size in bytes is 2. Fantastic. And we don't need a mask value for this one. We will later. I'm going to show you that. And set the value. We're going to set it to a value of 0. Why 0? Because it said right here, off. That's all good. It matches up with everything over here. Click OK. And you have your first one. In fact, if we ran the flight simulator right now, we could see it would be in the off position whenever you click the off button. But we don't want to do that because it takes forever to load. So we did the first row, and it's 0, 8, 9, or 2. Size in bytes 2. But really, we don't want to do this. This is a cool tip. You can duplicate rows if you need to, and it just saves you a little time instead of filling it out the same thing into each row. So what this does, but we can just duplicate it, same settings, same offset, same size in bytes, but set the value to 1. And for left, should actually be right. So we'll see. There we go. But you do need to make sure to change this one, of course. So when the right switch gets pushed, it shoots out a value of 1. That's the right value. Do the same thing with left, both, and start. There are 5 positions. It goes from 0 to 4, counting 0, and that gives it all of these rows. I duplicated them so I can delete these, and then under alternator, let's go to alternator. These are all values we would actually read, I believe. So this is the generator alternator voltage you'd read. This isn't what we want. No, 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 no. We can ignore these. Alternator over here. So we can use this offset, copy it over to, and again, this is the module with the device of battery, no, alternator, my bad. Alternator, FSUIPC offset, paste this in, size in bytes 1, and it reads a value of on or off. This is a toggle switch. It's different from the rotary switch. The rotary switch had a button here, a button here, a button here, a button here, and a here. And whenever you left one switch, you'd click another button, so you wouldn't have to do anything on release. But this is a toggle switch, so if you press it, you want something to happen, and if you release it, you want something to happen. So when we press this button, right here, we want it to give a value of 1 for on. But when we release it, we're going to do the exact same thing here. Offset, paste it over, size in bytes 1, set value to 0. So that says when it's on, and when it's off, it's off. Awesome. Let's go ahead and test this. That sounds great. Alrighty, we are actually going to have some problems trying to run this simulator, not only because it takes forever to run, but because offline mode is on. What's it doing? Sometimes if you update, online mode comes on, so if you go to settings, just go under offline mode and disable it. So we should be in online mode, and the little light bulb should be off. We want to be connected to the simulator, basically. We're connected to FSUIPC. Fantastic. Let's go to on a flight. This one looks fun. Oh, if you're using a G1000, it'll look a little bit different, so look up here or something. let's see how it goes. So right now, if we just click this little run button in MobiFlight, then get our switch panel over here. If we click run and then hit something, it should work. So the alternator button corresponds to the simulator. The battery button doesn't, because you remember we didn't configure it. Let's see if the key does now. Vroom. It looks like the start command is a little strange. It's kind of funny how Microsoft Flight Sim dumbed it down for us. If you click the start position, it holds it down for a specified amount of time. So it won't actually line up with your switch, because that's just not how Flight Sim works. But the rest of the positions should align, as long as the switch hits them, of course. That's awesome. So the switch works, our first switch works, and this just proves I'm not an idiot, maybe. That's our little tangent, very fun. Let's get back to work. So let's go to battery and do the same exact thing. Same module, same device. Action type, FSUIPC offset, and battery is right under alternator, offset 3102, size in bytes 1, set the value to 1 on press, and then on release, do the same thing, and then on release, have it 0. On, off, fantastic. Same offset on both configurations, besides the set value. Fuel pump is actually right here. This is going to be the exact same configuration as the battery, so I could, it's not the exact same, but it's the same format, so I could just duplicate it and make this the fuel pump, and delete this one, the old one, and then we have everything set in stone. Just change the device to fuel pump. Change the offset to 3104. In fact, you can just change the last digit to a 4. Change the last digit to a 4. Awesome. Really, duplicating the configuration can help you save a lot of time if you're pressed on time. This is an area of confusion. My last switch panel video, I didn't know how to mask bytes or bits, so it kind of didn't work very well. But if I go over to beacon, and you do spell it with an A, I figured out, we have right here a lights command. This controls them both at once, which we don't like. We have the switch panel, we have to have them separate. Oh, that's cool how it works. By the way, that little LED is whenever it's sending or receiving a signal, so that's fun. But let's see what this offset it's talking about. 0 delta 0 Charlie. 0 delta 0 Charlie. That's its offset. Let's see, it's referencing it a lot. Here we go. Offset 0 delta 0 Charlie. We were waiting for you. But let's just configure the first one up as we have in the past. Switch panel, device, beacon. There it is. Action type, offset. Let's just paste it in, see what happens. Oh, you have to copy it first, I guess. There we go. We got there eventually. We'll see. Yeah, for set value to 1 for on and 0 for off, just like we have before. Let's see how that goes. See if our life is alive. There we go. Oh, size in bytes 2. Almost forgot. Okay. Now when we see the flight simulator, and we see all of these switches, that's fantastic. Let's press run again. Once I press beacon, why is the nav going on? And like the first time we did it,
once I press beacon,
the first time all of the lights turned on and off, but this time it's just turning the nav on. And And this is kind of weird, kind of a weird behavior if you ask me, but it's because of the masked bytes. So you can mask this value right here with these 2 bytes it shows over here. I think I cracked the code, but you have this 0 through 9 for 0 through 9. And I think what you do is you just click 1 for which one you want. So deselect all of these. And then select the one you need. So 0 for navigation, 1 for beacon. Let's click 1. Okay, apply it. You got to apply it on both. And you can even copy the page, this mask value from the first page, once you select which one you want. And let's see if it works now. Yes, it did. That means I'm not a fraud. This is giving you a whole chunk of pie, and it's shoving a ton of data down your throat. But the flight simulator, this little beacon switch, only wants to control the beacon switch. It is not a micromanager, and I'd applaud it for that. But when you give it this whole honkin' offset over here, it has to control all of these lights: cabin, logo, wing, recognition, instruments, strobe, taxi. It gets overwhelmed, so it just does. In this case, it picked a random one, or picked the first one, but you really need to define which one it needs to do. You also notice when we first turned it off, that it turned all of the lights off. So it is controlling them all. I don't know why it's just selected the navigation light. In other simulators, usually it does them all. But we have this beacon light over here, and we can do the same thing for landing. We could copy the configuration. I'll just make a new one, so you have it fresh in your brain. Landing light, action type, offset, paste it over here. Oh yeah, we copied the mask value last, so we need to recopy the value. Paste it. Size in bytes is 2. It's an interval because it's a number over here. Mask value, let's see what we need here. For landing lights, we just need a 2. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, good. It's basically 0x, 3 zeros, and a 4. Let's have it set value to 1 on press and 0 on release. Let's remember this number, 0x0004. Do the same thing over here. I'm just gonna hop to this first. 1, 2, 3, 3 zeros and a 4. Post this offset. Size in bytes 2. 0x04. And then set value to 0. So let's see if this one works too. Landing. Awesome. Now I can just duplicate this and just save a little time. Taxi. Just change the mask value, because the offset is the same in this one. It's just the sub offset, or the mask value, picking the individual bytes you need to change. So let's go back to our fancy schmancy spreadsheet. Taxi is number 3. Let's see what that gives us. 0008. And with this, it's so easy that you can honestly just switch which one it is. Great. Taxi works. Duplicate the row. Make it nav. And remember, nav is the zero switch right here. So just change that to a 0 for some reason. I don't know why they didn't go in order. Cessna, come on. There we go. Delete the old one. Out with the old and in with the new. Duplicate it again. Strobe. Delete the old one. And this is our final light. So with the strobes, it's the same exact thing, just it uses number 4. Number 4. Not number 0. Okay. Number 4, not number 0. Okay. Fantastic. Let's test all of our switches really quickly. Beacon, yes. Nav, yes. Taxi. Uh-oh. We have a inconsistency with taxi. I forgot. You need to change the things when you duplicate the row. So when we go to taxi light, make sure to select taxi light. That's important. Nav light, select nav light. And for strobe light, select strobe. So that's something. If you realize it says no configuration specified, just look in your configuration and make sure it's set to the right one. And it's really helpful because it tells you which one it is over here. Oh, I think I messed up my fancy ordering. Oops. There's not really a way to rearrange the rows, but if you do want to, you can say have numbers in the configurations, and anytime you click this description button, it'll sort by description. So we now know that they all work, except pitot heat, because we haven't configured it yet. So pitot heat doesn't use the light offset. That would be a little silly. The first result gave us a failure mode, which basically, if we turn this on, the pitot heat fails, which isn't what we want. We want the pitot heat to turn on if it gets turned on. So let's use the second result over here of 02 Niner Charlie. Again, switch panel, pitot heat, and offset. This offset without the A's. Size in bytes is 1. Called it. Set value to 1. Same diff over here. Paste offset. Size in bytes 1. Set 0. Value. There we go. Pitot heat should work now. And as soon as we press stop and run to kind of refresh it, it does. So everything except for these two switches works. Let's go to Avionics 1 and 2. So Flight Simulator X, or FSX, doesn't have Avionics 1 and 2, it just has Avionics 1. In that case, you can either print a single rocker that's like fused together, or you can just have one of them inoperative. You'd move both at the same time anyways, most of the time with these switches. You kind of click in the middle. So if it's FSX, only configure one. If it's X-Plane or FS2020, configure them both. Avionics switch 1 with an offset. Fantastic. Avionics bus voltage, those are all values we'd read. Master avionics switch, and here's what I was talking about. Master avionics switch off or on, it only has one control. Let's see if we can find anything else. So what I was saying about the FSX is that it only shows one avionics master. So with these offsets, you only have one avionics master control that controls them both. So in all of the FSUIPC lists, these are referenced both as a group. So just kind of keep that in mind. You'd have to press them both together for it to work. So I guess we'll do that now. Master avionics switch. Here, size in bytes is 4 for some reason. It's a little strange. Let's see if we can't. Okay, size in bytes is 4. Good. And set value to 1 over here. On release, set value to 0. Let's click run again. And now, if we click this button, this second button doesn't do anything, but this first button does them both. Note you can do the same exact thing with the offset 3103, and it's in the neighborhood of alternator and battery, so you could use that as well. Use the same thing, and it should work just as well. So the last object we're going to do to not overcomplicate things is to do a key press for X-Plane. With X-Plane, if you use the avionics master switch, it only activates one of them. If you want to use both of them, you have to use a key press. So the key press, you'll activate avionics 2, click the 3 dots, and instead of doing an FSUIPC offset or custom offset, we're going to just do a keyboard input. So this keyboard press is going to be something we're never going to actually use. So you could go Control Shift Alt Windows G. That's a keyboard combination that I don't think you'll ever use. It can be any keyboard combination you want, but you just want to be able to assign it later in the simulator. So on press, it's going to be Control Alt Shift G. On release, it's going to be basically the same thing. Shift Control Windows Alt F. That's a keyboard shortcut we'll never use. It would be clumsy to do so. You can also just use simple keyboard shortcuts like A, but I use A. So we're going to do the complicated keyboard shortcut. And again, this doesn't matter as long as you reference the keyboard shortcut from MobiFlight to the same as the flight simulator. So with this, MobiFlight is basically only acting as a keyboard. In fact, if we go over to a sticky note and click run, on press and release, it has these keyboard shortcuts. So if we were to set this on release to a Y, then over here, whenever we release it, it'll click a Y. So that's basically what we're doing. This took me a little bit of work to find out. It's actually under electricals. If you search up avionics master, it gives you the first switch, the avionics master switch, but we want the second switch, which is actually the cross tie. This cross tie is basically the second avionics master switch. It's kind of a weird thing. I think it's so that they can use it universally for different airplanes. So the cross tie on and off. Let's assign on to our first keyboard shortcut, and we can even record the keystroke using MobiFlight. So I'm going to turn off the switch, and it's actually going to tell us what switches we're using. Now, when I turn the switch back on, I can record the cross tie on and do that. So this is basically the same thing as if we pressed the keyboard shortcut, but since MobiFlight is typing out a word, we can use it as a keyboard shortcut. X-Plane is super good on keyboard shortcuts. They almost negate the use for custom data refs. Alright, so you can click done, and it'll be all good to go. So let's test it finally. Make sure MobiFlight is running, because MobiFlight has to run to make the keyboard things happen. Now, if we click our button, it will function as we need it to. So that is really cool. We have a working avionics master switch. FSX has just one single master switch. X-Plane has the two with the crossfeed. You have to go around and do something. That is really cool. I really hope you enjoyed building your own Cessna 172 switch panel. And if you love it so much that you want to support upcoming projects just like this in the Cessna 172 project, feel free to donate, subscribe, like, or just follow the channel. Have a fantabulous rest of your day, and I will see you next week. Have a good one.